Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Medford Public Library. We're interviewing candidates in the 2014 election. We're interviewing Mr. Richard Pulcher of Lublin. He's a Democrat running in the 87th Assembly District. Mr. Pulcher, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Well, thank you.
Programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. As a first-time candidate, give us the short version of your bio, please.
Well, I was born and raised in a small town on a small farm in southwestern Minnesota called Stoughton. I attended Augustana College, where I got a degree in economics. While I was in college, I worked during the school year at a crippled children's hospital, where I was what they would call, my duties were what a CNA does today. Mm-hmm. And during the summers, I worked at Lutheran Bible camps. And after I had graduated, I received a assistantship to South Dakota State University in economics. My major was economics, my minor was mathematics. And my thesis was on the economics of using solar energy in corn drying. I was also part of a group that founded a group home in northern Minnesota for pre- and post-delinquents. In other words, people who were in reform school were coming out. They could spend some time here before being out of the system, or people who were in a little bit of trouble and needed some help to keep them out of the system. Okay. I briefly considered a career with the World Bank because one of my teachers at South Dakota State worked there part-time. But it wasn't long before I found out that they favored the rich and powerful and kind of ignored the poor people who really, it was their mission to help. So consequently, I've worked blue-collar jobs most of my life.
Yeah, you say on your website you're proud of your blue-collar jobs, and you also say you have a discomfort with community of big money. Do you want to elaborate on that quickly? Because I got some issue questions for you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, it comes from my experience when I was considerably younger. Big money was in the World Bank at the time. They were making loans to countries that were dictatorships. None of the loans would pay for themselves. And so these people were getting these loans they couldn't pay back. Well, they were 30 and 40-year loans. Who was going to bail them out when everything came down? Now, one of the ways they could get these loans was the people doing the research on the loans would ignore certain costs. And those costs involved the very poorest people that were going to be affected by it.
I see.
In other words, if there was a dam that was being built and a bunch of poor people needed to be relocated, they didn't count that cost and they didn't give them any money to help them relocate.
Okay. Let's talk about some issues. Specifically, if you're a member of the Assembly, and you're going to be voting on the next state budget, one of the biggest ticket items, of course, is aid to aid to schools. What would be your priorities as the Assembly debates the next budget for our schools, sir?
Well, a major priority is aid to our local rural schools. They are really hurting. And another thing that makes absolutely no sense to me is why we are spending state money to send people to private schools.
So you oppose the voucher and the choice program?
Absolutely.
Okay. You want it shut down?
Yes.
Okay. This summer the governor asked for both the Senate and the Assembly to withdraw or repeal the Common Core standards. Do you have a position on that, Mr. Pulcher?
Educators should educate. Legislatures should legislate. The legislature really doesn't belong in determining curriculum. It just doesn't.
Okay. A big issue in Northwest Wisconsin is the two mining questions. Could I get your opinion on the proposed open pit iron mine for Ashland and Iron counties and the frac sand debate, sir?
Well, the frac sand debate, we're not going to shut it down because it's already entrenched here. But what we need is more local input and possibly more local regulation, because many of these mines are just telling the local communities what they're going to do and say live with it. Similar to what I was running into as a young person, finding out about the dam that was going to be relocating all kinds of people, and they were left to do it on their own. So local control is a big issue. As far as the mine goes,
Gogebic mine, yes.
Yes. Is there a big shortage of iron in the country? Do we really need that ore?
Okay.
If it sits there, it's going to become more valuable. And if it's mined in an unsustainable way, we're going to be left with the debris from it for forever. Clean water is a very strong issue. Clean water, drinkable water, is the basic thing that all civilizations need to exist. You can't have dirty water. So clean water standards are extremely important, because once that water is dirty, how are you going to clean it up?
Okay.
And is the mining company going to say, oh, we're going to clean it up? If it costs too much, they'll just go broke.
Let's talk about transportation funding. There are projections that the next state budget, the state transportation fund, could be as much as 600 to 700 million short. If there's a deficit, how do you think it should be filled?
Well, with taxpayer money, we should not borrow against tomorrow. We should not sell bonds for transportation for today.
Would you be willing to raise the gas tax or the $75 you and I pay to register a vehicle?
Well, that's an immediate answer, but I think if you take a longer view, I live on a railroad track. I mean, I live on a railroad track. And I have to drive to Toma from Lublin to get on a passenger train. I have 30 trains going past my house every day. Not a single one of them carries passengers. Now, when a person gets to be my age, caring for a car is more of an inconvenience than having the freedom to travel. If we had more access to rail, we wouldn't need as many roads.
Okay.
And yes, transportation is important. I would just like to give you a story from when I was in college. Somebody asked, they were traveling through Wisconsin, and they were going from point A to point B, and the shortest route was on a 2-lane road, and the longest route was taking a 4-lane road. And my two friends were discussing, and the one who was planning on making the trip says, you're from Wisconsin, you know about these roads. If I take that 2-lane road, is it going to be bad? And the answer was, there are no bad roads in Wisconsin.
Okay. Let's talk about health care funding. 1 in 5 Wisconsin residents get their health care from our Medicaid program. The American Hospital Association says Wisconsin Medicaid reimbursement rates second lowest in the nation. If you've studied the issue, do you think those rates should be increased?
Yes.
You do?
I worked at Clark County Health Care Center, and we rely a lot on Medicaid for our, and I was also a union steward there. And one of the issues that came up in negotiations was we don't get paid enough to care for these people from Medicaid. So yeah, it should be raised.
There are now projections that there could be a deficit exceeding $1 billion in the next 2-year budget. If there is a deficit, how do you think it should be fixed?
Well, it has to be fixed. Now, we can either increase taxes, or we can cut services. Now, without going into the details of it, you can say one thing or the other, but it might not be right. One of the things that I bring out in my campaign is that Wisconsin has a $15 billion deficit. Debt, not deficit.
Debt.
A debt.
Yep.
Why is Scott Walker saying we have extra money and then giving a tax break when we should be paying down the debt? It makes no sense to me.
Okay. There will be a bill introduced next session to legalize medical marijuana. States of Colorado and Washington have legalized the recreational marijuana. Your positions on those issues, sir?
Pretty ambivalent. It's not something that I would fiercely oppose, nor something that I would go to bat for, because I'm removed from the issue. The people who are affected by the issue can come to me and I'll listen to them, but it's not terribly important for me.
Okay. It's always debated this question: should first offense drunken driving be a crime?
I have some fairly strong views on that, because I have friends whose lives have been ruined by our drunken driving system. If a cop sees a guy come out of a bar drunk, that guy has been a legal citizen until he turns the key. Mm-hmm. That cop will then come and fine him and make him a criminal. If a cop does that, he should be held guilty as an accessory. Now, where I come from in Minnesota, they have dram shop laws. If you're not familiar with them, what they are is, if a person is drunk and he gets in an accident, the bars that serviced him are held partially responsible.
Right.
Now, the bar doesn't necessarily have to pay anything, because they're insured. They have dram shop insurance. And that would work just like car insurance, is that if you have a lot of people being served, your rates are going to go up, and if you're relatively safe, your rates are going to go down. But that's the way that it could be. Now, should a first offense drunk driver be held criminally liable? No.
No.
But we need to keep the drunks off the road. We don't need to ruin their lives once they're caught.
Okay. Finally, I want to give you a chance to highlight differences between you and your opponent in the November 4 election.
Well, I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. I think that what we need to do is look at where Wisconsin is in the view of a national spotlight. Now, one of two of the things that really bother me as a citizen, and this is why I'm running, is to highlight the assaults on our economy by our own national government. One of the assaults took place in 1998 when Congress repealed Glass-Steagall. And Glass-Steagall upset our banking system. It put it on a slippery slope, which led to the banking crisis of 2008. Now they've tried to rectify it. We have Dodd-Frank and we have the Volcker Rule. But heavy lobbying by the banking interests are stopping that. So one of the things that Wisconsin can do to not stop or eliminate any exposure it has to our flawed banking policies, it can mitigate them. Now, we can take a step from our neighbors in North Dakota about how to do that. North Dakota is the only state at present with a state-owned bank.
Right.
A state-owned bank could help our smaller banks make good loans to smaller people. My village of Lublin doesn't have a bank. It had a community bank up until the 1980s. And since then it was bought out by several other banks. Now I remember when one of the banks was leaving, it said, we can't make enough money here, so we're shutting the bank down. Well, when Lublin had their own community bank, that bank was vested in the community. The community was vested in the bank. You went to the bank and asked for a loan, it was based on a relationship. Of course, you did have to get all the money paid back. But that guy knew your character, he knew what your assets were, everything.
Okay, I understand. Well, thank you. Richard Pulcher of Lublin is a Democratic candidate in the 87th Assembly District. The election is November 4. Mr. Pulcher, thank you for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.